Hello and welcome back to Drippy Drez. For those of you who have been regularly following my podcast or even regularly following my channel, I'm sure you're all very surprised to see that I released an audio the day that it was supposed to come out because you're not really used to this. And I'm sure some of you were even doubting on whether or not I would release an audio today because you all know I'm still sick. Well, don't worry, it has been on my mind, and it actually wasn't until last night that I decided I was just going to release it tomorrow. So, without further ado, let's get started on one of our final topics. Yep, today is going to be the second to last audio on this particular podcast. The last is going to be where I talk about Agatha All Along, the last two episodes, and the Mask movies. The reason being because after Drippy Drez, the podcast, ends, I am starting a new podcast called Drippy Drez's Podcast. Now, why am I ending Drippy Drez, the podcast, so soon? Well, because my type of humor is changing. And with my type of humor changing, I don't know, it just feels so weird. Like going from using a lot of unconfident / confident humor to just like straight up whatever humor I end up deciding to use in my next podcast. The reason being because I feel like a lot of people, despite enjoying my audios, they didn't really like the type of humor I was using because somehow they still associate that type of humor with Son of the Mask / Shrek the Third instead of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, even though Spider-Man is and always will be a lot more popular than Shrek or the Mask. Okay, Shrek is a lot more controversial, but I'm pretty sure Marvel is more popular because Marvel has a lot more movies and a lot more characters, whereas Shrek only has 4 main characters. You know, obviously the main character is Shrek, and only one of the other 3 has their own spin-off movies. So, like, I don't know, you would think people would be associating my type of humor more with the Marvel universe, especially because I've been talking about Agatha all along, but somehow that's just not how my humor has been resonating with people, and that is why I decided it's just better off to start a new podcast. Yes, my last 2 rap songs for that podcast will be released on Saturday. So like Friday is gonna be the release of the 13th episode of Drippy Drez, which is kind of ironic, and then we're gonna release 2 more songs the next day, and then Sunday I'm finally gonna release a video on my channel, and then starting next week Friday I'm gonna have a new podcast. It's gonna sound different, it's gonna probably feel different because, like, obviously I'm gonna sound different and it's just gonna be different, and I've decided that I'm going to do an introduction video and I'm gonna make it so that people can listen to Drippy Drez's podcast without actually having to listen to Drippy Drez the podcast. With my podcast ending, and with the last 2 movies I am talking about being something that most people have probably either seen or decided not to watch, I am going to do one final movie recommendation, and it is going to be something that is very appropriate considering the themes of my podcast that I've introduced, and that movie is Scream. Scream is a spoof of horror movies that follows this group of teenagers as, one by one, they start getting murdered, and it ends with a blank number of them still being alive. And in the movie, one of the teenagers talks about how horror movies like give are what get is are what's giving these murderers like these crazy ideas, and they have to pay attention to the lessons they listen to in movies. And then towards the end, like one of the girls is like, "Oh, so these movies create psychos," and the guy says, "No, movies make psychos more creative." And that right there is where I learned that, like, I've always had the idea that, like, movies make people more predictable deep down, but, like, Scream is, like, the movie that brought it out. Like, that's the movie that really made me think, okay, movies are not ruining society. We're ruining society, but we can use movies as a way of predicting people's behaviors, because if you already know that people are going to take it and they're going to use it as an excuse to ruin their life, you have a reason to call them out for their behaviors and say, "Hey, why are you doing this, man? Like, why would you let something so little ruin your life?" And I'm not really a horror movie person, or really just a Halloween movie person in general usually, but I really did like Scream, and I think a lot of people, like, even if it's not for that one line, or two lines, I guess, they would enjoy it just for the spooky season. And and I know I probably should have recommended it sooner, but to be fair to those of you who are complaining right now, I can hear you guys. You can watch half of it one night and half of it a different night before October is over. That way you can say that you watched Scream during spooky season. Well, that was the last time you're going to hear that type of humor, so I'm sorry to those of you who are going to miss it, and I'm happy for those of you who aren't going to miss it and who are excited to see what my next podcast is going to be like. Thank you all so much for listening to Drippy Drez, the podcast. I hope you all enjoy my upcoming videos, and I hope you all enjoy my next podcast. That one is going to be a lot longer, I promise, and I can't wait to talk to you all one more time on Friday, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to this audio. I hope you all enjoy the movie Scream. Feel free to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will talk to you guys later this week.